He will be there.
When I call on his name,
He will be there.
my God forever the same. Through all the joy, through all the pain, say the word and I'll go where you want me to. Listen to me now.
Hello and welcome to the First 30 Days podcast. I'm Carrie Grant.
And I'm David Grant. And today we're going to be talking about the subject of forgiveness and forgiving.
Yeah, big one. Now, our guest today is the incredible Richard Bender. It's so lovely to have you with us, Richard. Richard is a Rwandan British academic and researcher and a research fellow at the Luther King Centre, part of Durham University. And he's also a tutor at the Centre for Black Theology at the Queen's Foundation in Birmingham. Wow, that is some job or jobs that you've got going on there, Richard. Now, we're talking about forgiveness. Could you tell us a little bit about your life story? I know when I first met you, I hold my own story, which has needed a lot of forgiving. And then you told me just a few sentences of yours, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to just deal with everything I've ever needed to deal with right now, having heard your story.
It's very difficult to know where to start because it feels like it's been a very long life. I could start with my life as a primary school boy doing 14 miles to go to school and coming back from school. I can talk about, the physical disciplines that we received as African children growing up. The type of how could I say, disciplinarian regime we were raised with in secondary school, or the injustices of being dismissed in secondary school without reason. But I think our conversation bore on my experiences in 1994 as a young adult living in Rwanda and experiencing the Rwandan genocide. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context, and it's slightly political, but the reason I'm going to go a bit into my political biography is because for me, forgiving and not forgiving have both personal and political dimensions.
Wow.
And sometimes one leak into the other. So I was born in Rwanda in 1973. That is 11 years after Rwandan independence. And Rwanda was a colony of Belgium. Or previously it was a German colony. And the reason I mentioned the Belgians is because from the 1930s, they took what were social categories, Hutu, Tutsi, Twa. Those were the three groups of Rwandan people, and transformed them into political groups within their politics of colonial divide and rule. What happened then is that after 60 years of that politics of hatred and suspicion between the two groups, we ended up with a genocide in 1994, which in the space of 3 months claimed the lives of close to 1 million people.
Wow.
Gosh.
And it's just an absurd concept, but that was the reality of it. Personally, I was then 20, going to 21. I was a student in a school of law. I'd just started my studies in law. So I was both aware of what was going on, even though I couldn't have predicted what was going to happen. As I said, genocide is truly an absurd moral thing to try to understand. And now, when you speak about Rwanda, most people are aware of what happened in 1994. It seems to be common knowledge. But the way you feel it as an individual, how you experience it is totally different. Because for genocide to happen, a group of individuals or politicians you don't know decide to strip you of your human identity. And from one day to the next, you become an object, you get dehumanized, and there is no feeling really in the world that can convey how you feel as a homeless in the world. Um, on one level, those people are faceless individuals. In my case, they were very familiar faces. And that's because I come from a mixed family of Hutu and Tutsi. And in 1994, half of my family were decimated by the other side of the family. Um, and as a mixed child, you feel that level of transgression as a very, very deep betrayal. Fundamentally, it appends your reality and the foundations that sustained you, so your world disappear, and you find yourself a stranger in a world you thought you understood. So I lost relatives, I lost siblings, I lost my best friend, I lost my girlfriend, and those hurt. They hurt especially when you know the faces sometimes of the people who did it. Um, as a victim myself, when you become victim of something of a political violence like that, and you survive, it is very difficult to quantify what was your hurt and what was the violence.
Yeah, where do you even begin?
Yeah, but where I begin is the feeling of powerlessness. There is nothing more frightening than when another human being makes you feel so impotent, so powerless, that you even survival is out of your hands. And I remember experiencing those feelings as I went from one roadblock to another. It left me feelings of abject fear and self-loathing. So I'm trying to go quickly through those experiences.
Gosh,
that
no,
you
take
asked
your
No, take your
time.
time,
Please take your
please.
time.
So there is this feelings of hurt and loss. There is this feeling. There are these feelings of loss of agency, loss of power, loss of meaning and worth. Um, and then when you survive, you can't accept yourself as a survivor, because
Yes.
you realize that survival is not dependent on any of your actions or your ability. Obviously, other people had different experiences, but that was my experience. I had this bizarre experience in 1994, and this is the feeling of utter moral loss and the guilt that I felt at the sight of children being killed. We all have our memories, the memories that we carry from that time, and that we have to wrestle with. And I think the main experience for me is the memory of me sitting with one of those children, a boy who was dying, and neither of us could speak because he physically could not speak. Because I could not speak simply because I was speechless in the presence of this incomprehensible spectacle of adults killing their own children. So you have your own issues of loss that you're wrestling with, and you have to feel this sort of self-loathing because as an adult, you have been brought up with a way of understanding family, understanding your responsibility towards children. And that is probably one of the things that have taken hold as I grew, or as I survived 1994 and its aftermath. So there you have it. You come out of it, and it is when you survive and you're on the other side that the enormity of it all hits you.
Yeah.
As when you begin to process the emotions of it, and you have to face this daunting task of confronting the world, and that is the world in which the perpetrator lives as well. And that is just unpredictable.
There's layers in everything that you are saying. Like you've mentioned self-loathing. I wouldn't have even imagined that for some reason, that someone would feel self-loathing.
Survivor's guilt.
Or for so many reasons that might crop up as an adult, but also just having to live amongst people who are the perpetrators of this.
There is it's a unique experience, I suppose, and that's why researchers and scholars have been fascinated about what happened in Rwanda in 1994, and that's the fact that we have to live in each other's face, even after. If you try to imagine what happened with the extermination of European Jews, there was a certain separation between, whether you call the Nazi and Jews.
Of course.
In the aftermath, the spheres of the survivors and the spheres of perpetrators was almost separated. In 1994, you had, after 1994 in Rwanda, you had to live together.
Wow.
And as you said, there were layers, because this was happening in the context of civil war. It's a long story to try to tease out, but
and in the history of colonialization as well, to that.
Indeed.
The three groups.
So with this absolute horror that you're witnessing, not just witnessing, you're in the middle of, not just in the middle of, but a horror that's perpetrated by people you love, who you've trusted in your life. And you're there with the emotions that you must have been feeling. How do you even begin a journey towards forgiveness in such circumstances?
Even God, before you even get to forgiveness, like even the concept of where is God?
Actually, that's the first one, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the fear. The fear of it is that you might. I mean, I was a believer. I'd just become a Christian before the genocide started. I became a confessing Christian, because I was educated in a Catholic seminary with every intention of becoming a priest.
Wow.
Until I was dismissed from the seminary. That's another story for another time. So I had known religion. I hadn't had a committed faith. It is after my days in the seminary that I embarked on a journey to discover personal faith, and I had become sort of a confessing Christian, a Pentecostal church in 1993. So a few months, 1992, a few months before the genocide really started. And God had been central to my life. Faith had been central to my interactions with people, and I really approached Rwandan society with the problems it had from the perspective of faith. It's interesting that you would ask where God was, and you have to understand, I think, the cultural background we grew up in and the spiritual history of Rwanda, because we didn't discover God because of white missionaries, God existed in Rwanda and spirituality existed in Rwanda in a different way.
Amen.
But Rwandans were a monotheist people, so there was a very rich spiritual tradition in the country. And part of that is the view of God as so transcendental that we do not have to involve the divine in the business of running the world. In the understanding of God, or Imana, as Rwandans call the divine, was that in creating the country and the land, God had provided the people with the mechanisms, the rituals, the traditions, the values, and the spiritual ancestors and other institutions to help them manage the country. So it never really occurred to ask the question, where is God? Because as actually when you, and that is a question that comes after, when you are living through that sort of situation, you are reaching out for every ally you can find, and God is most certainly one you went to. And it's really fascinating. The story started when the genocide started. I was in a Christian retreat. Because we'd been preparing for exams in a context of upheaval on the campus. So my then girlfriend said, let's go and seek God, because it is becoming harder to survive on campus without God. So God was probably, I tell myself that God was there suffering with us, but I'm pretty sure that is something I picked up after the genocide, as I began to meditate on this. When it was happening, it was raw reaching out to the divine to make you survive, or to make you to help you make sense of the next hour, but also trying to keep yourself pure. Because when people are dying around you, when houses are burning, when there are these strange smells in the air, your mind and your heart get really disturbed, and you begin to think differently, and fear brings loathing, and loathing brings thoughts about the people who might be committing these crimes. So there was also a sense of saying, this is happening, God, shelter my soul. God becomes an object of anger after that as well. When you are in the process of recovering, as when you turn to God and say, how did you let this happen? And that is when the wrestling with your heart and your faith truly begins.
Can you tell us about that period? The wrestling with God and with faith.
I think it started bang in the middle of when it was happening. And I think it really happened when I was holding that boy's hand. That was my first moment of crisis. I was a crisis of faith, and I was saying, I can understand me as an adult paying the price maybe of whatever sins you have committed as a society.
Yes.
But these are the innocent. How do you let somebody like this suffer at the hand of adults? And then you look around and you think, I joined the church because I thought the church would offer some sort of moral home, which will provide us a compass
Yeah.
to guide our consciences in these times of crisis. And the tragedy of the whole of 1994 is the church, as a representative of the divine in the world, fell silent. So part of my wrestling with the divine was saying, how could you give us an institution so bankrupt, so um, unable to stand up to hate discourse and rhetorics of extermination? And then you process that as well. You realize that it is a church born out of a colonial context, a church which was compromised from the beginning, and a church which would have been unable to provide the moral guidance that you needed anyway, simply because its beginnings. Um, it's very difficult to explain colonial missions without being angry, but I suppose angry is the right word, or anger is warranted.
Yes.
But I think the ways in which white missionaries, French missionary, white fathers in this case, approached the business of evangelizing Rwanda, served to sow the seeds of that hatred. A brilliant one theologian called Tarsis Gatwa. Um, I think he's related to the next Doctor Who, has written a book about the churches and the ideology of genocide. So that's something that one would have to read. That's a book somebody should read to understand these sort of struggles we had with the church as an institution. And then after you see, you try to make sense of yourself in the world, trying to you read the Bible and you say, I remember when we went to church for the first time after the genocide, somebody had a word of prophecy, and they said, God is saying that as we have been forgiven, so we should forgive. And I remember saying in my heart, I'm not there yet. And I'm not sure that this is God speaking, because I don't think that I have even reached a point where God Himself or herself has been forgiven for this. So, but these are realities that you have to allow yourself to take time with, and you come out bruised like Jacob when he came across with the angel. It takes time, David, but you make a way through that.
It sounds like for you, it was a process and you allowed yourself to go through that process rather than pushing yourself towards something that would not have been real and authentic, a forgiveness that would have been a forgiveness in words, but not in the heart.
I don't think that there is a process you would define as one size fits all
No.
in this. Different experiences, different journeys, and different processes. And for me, I think you truly need to have what I call a moral base of operation. There has to be a matrix out of which you derive your agency, the stuff that gives you the determination to live with others, to relate with others, and to act in the world. One of the things that I found very important is to hold on to life and to value life
Oh, yes.
as a gift. You might be ambivalent about the reality of survival, because really you're a passenger in your survival, but you can actually decide what you do about how you handle the life that is given to you after um, after that horrendous experience, and I was really determined to take life as a precious gift. And the other process, which is so vital and really vital for the stuff we're talking about in terms of forgiveness, it is the understanding that this sort of violence truly destroys your humanity and your agency, and you have to give yourself time to rebuild that. Because for me,
Of course.
forgiving is an act of a capacity. You have to have literal moral and legal capacity to act and to give forgiveness. And when society has conspired to take that humanity away, um, and when you have felt so powerless, and when you have lacked agency, literally, when you could not move from A to B because you want to do so, you have to relearn the practice of being self-possessed, of being the owner of your person, of your actions, of your emotions, of your feelings. That's why I was very resistant to the voice saying, forgive. And I said, well, I'm not human to forgive yet. I need to rediscover the person in me
Yeah.
who has the capacity, truly the moral and spiritual capacity to forgive. And to build that, you go through small processes and you do actions that give sense to that humanity. You make friends. I adopted a little boy. He's a man now and he has his own children. And gradually you begin to embrace this new world you find yourself in, and the possibility of confronting the consequences of what has happened.
Yes, and you know what? In our book, the 30 Days book, we on days 18 and 19, we wrote about forgiveness and the concept of forgiveness that you have so expressed and broadened and sort of made us all aware how much of a journey it takes sometimes to even get to a point to consider yourself
Capacity,
able to have the capacity to begin the journey of forgiveness. But I wondered if you could possibly read a section from that for us, please, Richard.
Firstly, on being forgiven. The Bible tells us that everyone has sinned and all fall short of God's ideal. But the Bible also tells us there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. This means that God is making a distinction between admitting wrongdoing and shame. It is only because of His love that we can bring our imperfection to Him. We can come boldly and with confidence to our loving Father. He will not throw it back in our face. He will not use it against us or hold on to it. There is no shame in Jesus. Shame is the appendix of the soul, the totally unnecessary, good-for-nothing trait. But when we give it voice, it has the power to control our lives. And then forgiving others. It is in God's nature to redeem. This part of God's nature infuses everything He does. It is constant, redeeming relationships or helping us to recover our emotional world is all part of the redemptive experience. Forgiving others is both a choice and a journey, a decision and a way of life. We do not need to deny the hurt or the wrong behavior towards us. We do not need to break it down into bite-sized, manageable chunks or minimize it in order that we can cope. We can be empowered to forgive wholesale. Forgiving others sets us free. free from the burden of having to think about the situation over and over. It frees us from the relentless nature of being constantly triggered by past wounds.
You read that so beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there ever a point, I'm just thinking about your story, Richard, where it would be okay if you didn't forgive? Is it okay just to not forgive?
It's not okay. Not. I wouldn't. Carrie, I don't think that I would put it in those words. It sometimes it is hard to forgive. It is hard to forgive, especially if I were to take you back in our experiences, especially when you feel that the weight of forgiving is heavier than maybe the burden of holding on because of what has been done. It is especially difficult in our situation where you think that by forgiving, you are betraying
Yes.
those who are no longer with us,
Mm.
who cannot voice their assent, and you feel that you owe it to them to hold on to that wrong because it is not sphere in that space. It's the only shared experience that still connects you to their soul. So sometimes not that easy. But as I said, personally, I can understand that sometimes it's very difficult to accept forgiveness. There is a kind of unforgiveness in our situation. Again, in the sort of experiences we've had. I've known people, I've interviewed people who committed these atrocities, who have given their lives to Jesus and became Christian, but still wonder if they have been forgiven, or even having been forgiven by God and having sought the forgiveness of the victims, if they can forgive themselves. So both this spectrum of unforgiveness are possible. Personally, I don't think that it is okay. I think it is a burden. It is not healthy, because I genuinely believe in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and the gift of life that He has brought to us, that we should embrace and live in abundance. So it's not it's not always easy to forgive, and it is understandable when people are struggling with forgiving hearts.
Sure.
I don't think that it is okay or healthy.
At what point did you know that you had forgiven those
Or is that ongoing
who
even?
had devastated your life, or is that something that is ongoing?
I think, as we said, I think we have to accept that it is a process. What I think is important is the principle. And the principle comes from what I've called my base of operation. My base of operation is my deep rooted Christian faith that also embraces the sort of spiritual upbringing I received from my family. And I think from it, I truly believe in forgiveness as a principle. And that is something you say, but I start with believing that when betrayal has happened, when relationships have been broken, the only remedy that is possible for life to be enjoyed and experienced fully is forgiveness. It is ideal when it is given and received, but I also believe that it can be given unilaterally to start the journey towards freedom. And I think once you embrace that way of looking at things, you give yourself a platform to encounter obstacles and be proactive and be active in the work of forgiving rather than asking the question whether I should or I should not
Yes.
forgive. So the principle is that it doesn't make the work any easier,
Sure.
and it is not linear. It really is not linear. It is such a cyclical work, especially when it is in a situation in which memory plays a big role, especially in these sort of political issues where every year you have to go through rituals of remembering. And so when you go through the ritual of remembering and reactualizing the pain, you have to also remind yourself that alongside memory, you have your tools to each year brings an increment in handling memory better, in taming these feelings of anger and hatred much more. You don't run away from the emotions, but you know that you have the tools to deal with them.
It's incredible. Richard, you spoke earlier about, you just said it in passing really, about, oh yeah, and then I interviewed someone that had been one of the perpetrators. And does forgiveness necessarily have to mean reconnection or reconciliation or any kind of dialogue with people who have done bad stuff to you?
No, I don't think so. I think in ideal circumstances, there should be an encounter of the gift of forgiveness, and when the two people have been wronged or who have been in this sort of broken relationship can come together and work on repairing it. But it sometimes just not possible, and I don't think that's sometimes desirable.
There's just the wisdom, isn't it, of knowing when that's the right thing to do and when it's like, there needs to be a line here.
Yes, and I think there is the ability to forgive and the willingness, or actually the necessity, to reconcile yourself with the world of the perpetrator, because I think in the world of the perpetrator there are things that are unforgivable, and you have to draw a line somewhere. But that's my feelings. You can't. There are things that should not be forgiven, because out of forgiving, it's as if you're justifying dynamics and misuses of gifts and power that give a rise to dehumanization. And I don't think that those aspects of the perpetrator's sphere or world should be condoned or reconciled with.
No, they need to be called out.
They need to be called out. They need to be challenged. My meeting with when I spoke about speaking with perpetrators, obviously because of the intimacy of what was done in your family.
Yes.
Families are just incredibly impositions. Forgive my word. We are born into them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then in situations like the ones we experienced, they turn against each other, and you have to decide whether you still embrace this family as your family, or if you turn away. But if you turn away from your uncle, what happens with your cousin? So do the parents eat the sour grapes, and the children suffer the edginess in their teeth, or do you confront your family? So there has been quite of confrontations within the family. Some of them have taken decades to summon the right tools to go and say, how did you do this? And what did you think were going to be the consequences of this on us and on the family? I think sometimes it is inevitable simply because you want to preserve the matrix of life in which you have been brought. And for us, family is vital. So you can't avoid that. But there are stuff you had to say, I can speak to you, I can understand some of the things you have done. For the actions for which you have apologized, you can be forgiven. But there are elements of your politics or the way you look at others that I can never tolerate. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very
Richard,
wise.
you are so incredible, and thank you so much for sharing. I feel so privileged at having heard your story, but also just the honesty with which you speak about your getting through. Yes, it is overcoming. It's proper overcoming, but it's a process. That's not cheap. That's not easy. Thank you for being as honest as you've been, and sort of
Absolutely.
really, I really feel like, people that are having their first 30 days of walking with Jesus and they've got stuff they know, I know I've got to confront this. I feel like you've given people permission to take time. You've given people permission to think broadly about their circumstances, and your grace just shines. Thank you so much.
Completely.
No, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for having me
Oh,
here.
thank you.
And I'm hoping it was not upsetting in any way. And these big experiences, in my opinion, do not devalue any other person's experience, whether it is what people might think it is a limit. I'm just thinking about how you started, Carrie, and
Yeah.
saying
I'm
when you
I'm
heard
going home and I'm forgiving everyone.
when you said you heard my story and you thought, my story is insignificant, but
Oh, hugely
no, I
significant.
think every experience matters. Every sense of a relationship that has been betrayed is important to the person who's going through the journey. And I think, yes, as you said, they have to be given the space to feel that it is okay to take your time to become an acting person who is giving freely and fully, because that is where I think redemption and restoration happens on both parts. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for listening and watching. The First 30 Days of Walking with Jesus is published by SPCK. It's available online and from bookshops. Thank you.
Thanks for watching and listening.
The First 30 Days of Walking with Jesus is available in bookstores, online and audiobook. For more information, please visit spckpublishing.co.uk. You have been listening to a Monkey Nut podcast.